Well, United have concluded their pre-season programme, 6 matches across Europe. The team is looking all right, I think, although there was a freak out after Milan. This is the big season preview with Wayne today. Who better to think about what's to come? Sometimes I've got to force you to think about the future rather than the past, Wayne.
Yeah, well, I'm here to freak out. Why not? I can do a freak out. There was plenty of it in the air after the Milan game, wasn't there? So
there was. Interesting. Pre-season friendly, folks. Let's not get too concerned, although it was quite shit. So, all right. So we're going to talk a little bit about, what we see from Carrick's team right now, what the state of the squad looks like. So I guess a little bit on the transfer market and what is not happening. Where the strengths and weaknesses are in the squad, and then a little bit about rivals because there are other teams. 6 games then. I mean, what do we make of pre-season? It's a long time since United have done a kind of European-focused pre-season. It's normally off to America or Asia or something to bring in the big bucks. This won't have been that lucrative.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to make of the results, really, because it's 2 wins and 6. Doesn't feel that good if you put it on that level, but it's not really about that, is it? And players have been coming back in bits and pieces because of the World Cup.
Yeah, it's funny because I think it is funny because you said there that it's been a long time since we've done something like that, but the last 6 years, if you think post-COVID, and obviously COVID itself, we had 1 pre-season friendly before football kicked off again. And then since then, it has been a case of disjointed pre-seasons. I know that there's been a couple over in America since then, but it has been a bit weird ever since then. And the nature of, we spoke a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about things like this, but the nature of how disjointed it's been because of the World Cup is obviously going to leave you with unanswered questions about the state of where we are. You're just not going to get questions like that. But I was talking to Paul Parker about this, and he made an excellent point about, back in the day, Brian Kidd would tell them not to do any work while they're away. He said, your work starts when you're back at the cliff or you're back at Littleton Road. And obviously they changed that as players became more athletic, but also because attitudes towards the start of the season changed. I think the idea became that every game was important. Alex Ferguson talks about this many times in the early years under Abramovich at Chelsea, because he would say, they changed the game was in terms of how you had to prepare. And now every single game is important. So you can't afford to not be adequately prepared. So when you see a disjointed pre-season, and every club is in the same kind of boat with staggered returns from the World Cup, but really that doesn't matter. You're concentrating on what your club's doing. And we have had the staggered return, and we haven't seen some players with game time. And you're looking at that and thinking, all right, well, they might not start the first games of the season. And how many games can United afford to start behind?
Yeah.
The issue that you've got is, the issue that we've got discussing it as supporters is the expectation based on what happened at the end of last season, compared to the expectation based on what's happened in pre-season. Because you could overreact and say that it's been a poor pre-season, but you could also look at it and say, well, it's emphasised some of the issues that we already knew existed. Yeah. And I think that's where I am with the validity of it, and where I am with that from that insular point of view, where every club's affected by the same kind of thing, but United have not given any minutes to Kobbie Mainoo, really. Well, not enough minutes. That midfield unit that we wanted to see blend together. All right, Tielemans and Santos have had time together. But the defence still, we've got all the numbers, but none of them getting enough numbers on the pitch. All these kind of things, all these issues still exist going into the season.
Yeah.
And, all right, some of them couldn't have been resolved by Michael Carrick. Some of them are a victim of circumstance due to what's happened at the World Cup and as a consequence of international duty. But others, you think, well, the club could have addressed them with transfers. And I think that's where I do dip my toe in a little bit into the reactivism of the way that people are. I'm not normally like that. We're not normally like that, having that conversation, but I do think this was a different kind of summer. We all anticipated all these issues were going to happen. So for us to be in this position now, and it is hypersensitive because of the fact that it concluded with a defeat to Ruben Amorim's AC Milan. I think the overriding, the prevailing point is, are United in a position where they've escaped the banter era, which is the question that we're all asking. But when you've ended the pre-season in classic banter era United, it doesn't bode well for what follows. You know what I mean? I think that's the only concern I've got. I don't buy into how much it's going to play a part in the bigger picture of the season, but carrying it around as baggage is not a great thing. That's my takeaway from.
That feels fair enough, yeah. I mean, I do think there's a bit of a social media reaction. Carrick certainly wasn't panicking after that defeat, as messy as it was. I mean, they didn't really create too many I know they scored twice, but didn't create that many chances. And some of the pressing issues and goals scored from wide areas kind of reared their ugly heads again. But overall, the programme, I thought, worked pretty much for United. They've got players to the fitness levels they could do, given that when they were returning. I mean, I guess the latest returners were Manu and Rashford. Reports today about Rashford potentially Barcelona, reinvigorating their interest. That should be no surprise to anyone who understands how that club works. We'll get onto the transfer piece of it, but I thought the programme was okay. What I liked about what I've seen from United is, we haven't seen a lot from Tielemans. We've seen a lot from Andrey Santos. I thought at the end of last season that we would see a little more evolution towards what I think Michael Carrick wants, right? So last season, under Carrick, mostly quite reactive football, mid-block, defensively secure, about shape, and then hit your opponent's weaknesses, fairly pragmatic. And what I assumed United wanted to do under Carrick, or Carrick wants to do, is to be a higher possession team that has more control, right? And I'm seeing enough elements of that in pre-season that I generally like what I see, discounting the mess in Milan, which I can't really explain, other than they just didn't do the obvious stuff against the Ruben Amorim team. And so those are the bits I like. Santos, I think... who knows where his ceiling is? It's a bit hard to say, but he seems a very mature fellow on the pitch for his young age and very little experience, really. I mean, it's less than 30 games at Premier League level. He is very sort of pass forward. He gets the ball, he looks to break lines. Simple passes, not Hollywood balls, but looks to progress it from the defensive third into midfield and attacking areas well. I like that. He gets around the pitch well. He's not a physical monster. I still think the squad is missing that a little bit, just options, basically. So I like those elements. And then the things I'm really concerned about, the defence and how old it could look with Shaw and Maguire in there. Or static, maybe that's the word. A little bit ponderous, and that's a bit concerning. And obviously how injury plagued it could be. We've got Maguire, who's older, Ligt, who's been out for it'll be a year before he returns, we think, and Martinez, who's always injured. He's not currently, or he came back with a minor injury from the World Cup, in minor, right? But he played against Milan, so so like that, nothing's happened there, and you're like, maybe United are in the top three in the league in terms of attacking. I think that's right. They were third on XG in the Premier League last season. They've got the addition of Youri Tielemans, very good passer. Marcus Rashford, if he stays, unclear so far. A bit more Mbeumo and Mbeumo and Cunha have had another year at the club. Lacey has had a lot of pre-season. He'll be an option. There's a lot of attacking resources. And yet, just to conclude the concerns piece, I don't know if it's a top 5 or 6 defensive unit, really, and that concerns me a little bit. Maguire said after Milan, we want to play high up the pitch. We want to put teams under pressure. You cannot do that if you've got no speed at the back and you've got a dysfunctional press, which was very much the case against Milan.
Yeah, and we played City when we were massacred at City, and that was like Maguire and Shaw very high up the pitch. I know that was a Ruben Amorim in his system, but the point stands. You started that set talking about Shaw and Maguire, and I think maybe and I don't want to think like I'm being unkind digging those out, but I think if you start a season with those two as your first choice, as United have for 4 or 5 years of us knowing that they're probably not Premier League winning standard, and the proof is in the fact that they haven't done it, that you then ask the question of how far you can go with them. And they've been admirable servants for the club, and you wouldn't discount what they can bring and offer in a squad. I think that's important, an important distinction to make, because Shaw and Maguire as personalities and the way that this is almost like a backhanded compliment, it might even come across like a criticism, the way that they've managed to survive so many transfer windows and survive so many dead ends within the career to sort of resurrect themselves, so many managers. But that's somewhat of the issue, isn't it? That a manager gets changed and these players have had clean slates and they can get to go again. And they have survived through a number of managers since Shaw many more than Maguire, and Maguire since Solskjaer was brought him into the club. Mm-hmm. We can't forget that it was probably 3 years ago when Maguire was about to get 3 or 2 years since Maguire was about to be sold to West Ham under Ten Hag, and that could have been a point where, and how many players we brought in to provide competition for Luke Shaw, who are so many in number now that it's ridiculous. You can list them off, and all right, you could look at them now and go like, yeah, Tellez, Reguilon, Malacia, none of these players were ever good enough. But when they broke in, or at least Tellez and Malacia, when they initially had performances to scare Shaw, you thought, oh, they might be good enough to at least provide decent competition, but that fell by the wayside very quickly. And what you're left with is players who their mere survival is the stamp of approval that they've got of staying at United because they've outlasted the other players around. The issue with Maguire is partly due to durability and partly due to form, because like he has played well when he's played in a position that helps him. Yeah. I think he's been really commendable. I don't think he's always outstanding. I think there's still issues when he's there at his best. But I think when he's been played at his best and when United have compensated for the issues that he does have, then we've got a very good defender there and a very good squad defender. The issue is that we've gone through all these managers and we've had so many different ideas on who these different defenders should be we've brought in, and you've left with this ragtag bunch of defenders who haven't ever been cohesive. And now I know we've talked about that in the past, but right now, and sorry to labour on the concerns, but you talked about the defence and it is one of my bugbears. You've got two starting fullbacks who we haven't talked about. Dalot. Mazraoui is probably the fit-for-purpose squad player in a title-winning side. You would say, all right, he could go in there. Dalot isn't because he's too defensively weak, and Luke Shaw just isn't because time has passed him by now.
Yeah,
he's going to be a good squad member to be in a Champions League team. I've got no doubt about that. But I don't think as a starting player to challenge for a league title, I just don't think that standard's there. I think also that's if he's durable enough. So, but in the middle of defence, you've got Ligt, who the jury's out on whether or not he can sustain a full season. Hopefully he can, now the back injury is sorted out, touch wood. Martinez, who, even when he's been fit, you and I have gone back and forward on his ropey form. I think sometimes we've been at odds of like how well he plays. You think the quality that he brings is that he can advance with the ball, and none of our players, apart from Ayden Evan, it seems, can do that. So even then, you've got two players who don't show, demonstrate enough quality in terms of staying fit enough. So then you've got Ayden Heaven, who is probably good enough if he gets to run a game. So you've got 4 or 5 defenders in there. And Leny Yoro, who I think has been played at right back, doesn't have the pace for right back, doesn't really have the pace for centre back. If he and Evan play, out and out, so I think he could get exposed, and I think he has been once or twice. But if he plays alongside someone experienced enough, or as a run of games alongside someone with the qualities to compensate for that, I think no problem, because I think there's a really top-class centre-back in there. And that could be a good... Sorry, just to finish on this very quickly, that could be Yoro and Heaven, but that's ludicrous to suggest that they're ready to play as a partnership at that level. So United have got so many different problems in that area, even if they've got the numbers, and even if individually they've got the quality in most of the areas, that nothing seems to fit right. It's a miracle that we got to where we did last season based on the combinations that we had, really. So that's a concern.
It is definitely a concern, and I think that's part of the reason why Carrick to use the parlance of the day, platformed players in a certain way and played fairly, pragmatic football, even prosaic. I think in his 17 games last season, he saw the problems. He's like, okay, here's the best way to get results. But if you want to move forward as a team, I don't think you can play like that. Really. I mean, unless we're just going to try and consolidate a Champions League place this season, which we'll come on to it. The higher-ups may be thinking as well. If you want to move forward and get within 5 or 8 points of the title winners, something like that, then and you want to play front foot forward controlling football, which I think Carrick does, certainly would suggest it by buying Tielemans and Santos, then you have a lot of problems if Maguire is starting 50 games for you. And that's not a criticism of him. I think that's just an observation about his age and his pace.
Yeah.
Fine leader and defender though he is at blocking and tackling and doing the box defending stuff, it almost did for Ollie as well. There was other stuff that did for Ollie, but when he went from being a reactive side playing counter-attacking football to trying to be more possession heavy, the players he had at his disposal kind of did for him in terms of the results, and that was a real problem, and that is my concern. Yeah. It's the same with Ligt, really. Even when he's fit, he's not like he's a bit quicker than Maguire, but not really. Yoro shows a lot of lack of experience. I think Ayden Heaven shows more maturity. I'm not worried about Yoro's pace that you mentioned. I mean, I don't know what his top speed is, but that's not really the thing. I think it's the kind of defensive positioning and consistency around that I worry about with Yoro. I think he's got a really high ceiling, but the floor is a bit too low at the moment, whereas Heaven's floor is not bad at all. But my feeling is, given all the problems that we've mentioned in defence, that one of Heaven and Yoro had to have really big seasons. Like, one of them has to break through to be, hey, we're starting you every week. If the back four regularly is Shaw, Martinez, Maguire, Dalot, that's a real concern for me. I'm not freaking out, but I don't think that is a top two back four at all if we were trying to progress forward. Midfield's a different issue, right? Because look at who we've played in midfield over pre-season. Santos has played 5 games out of the 6, I think. Tielemans just come in. Menu had a couple of minutes, that's it. And then Mount played a bit before he got a mysterious injury, which we were told is precautionary, but he's missed 2 games as a result. And who knows? If you tell me he's back for Saturday, I might believe you. If you tell me he's back in November, I'd believe you too, right? That's the problem with Mount. But you've got a lot of technical players there, very, very technical, and not a lot of ground covering, physical, nasty kick your shins type stuff. And it might be, if you want to play a very technical style of football where the footballers are all very close together, that's okay. I mean, remember the Brighton game at the end of last season, and just you played Mount and Menu and Fernandes in the triangle, and they were tiki-takaing the ball around. They look very pretty, right? That's fine. But if you get a couple of physical bastards who want to kick you, sometimes you need to counter that, right? And I'd like an option in the squad that is that, and we don't have that at all, and there's no one in the academy that's going to do that. Either the first alternate as a defensive midfielder at the moment is Tyler Fletcher. I like some of what I see from him. I don't think he's ready for the big time yet, and so that leaves me a little bit concerned. Not freaky out concerned, although it would be if, I mean, Mount's injured now. We've got one more injury. You are a Champions League away tie at the Bernabeu, starting Tyler Fletcher, basically, and it's it feels a bit thin. The positives are the technical qualities of Santos and Tielemans are really, really high, right? The physicality isn't quite there. Neither of them are great athletes. I mean, Santos is not a bad athlete, is he? But neither of them are in the top tier athletes. But technically, they're very, very sound, and they certainly points to a direction of travel in terms of how Carrick wants his team to function.
Yeah, I'm hopeful on that. Alongside you, I'm not sure how much conviction I place in it, only because I do worry about are these the kind of players that would have come in anyway? Are they to suit a Carrick style player, or are they the players that United had to pivot towards once the targets and the targets that we heard of before were all the same targets before Carrick was manager, and all right, these are the names that are available on the manager on the market. But last summer, for example, you had it at least felt like manager and club were aligned because of the nature of the players that we went for and the nature of the players that were being shifted out. Now, I feel like because of the issues that we talked about last time, United being a little bit more reactive in the market and maybe seeing it, or maybe the way that the market went has turned United into a reactive club, has made it a little bit different. And so my optimism is basically based around the qualities of the players rather than it being something that Carrick wants to do. So when I look at it, I say, all right, Tielemans, we are the top club that's taken the gamble on him now. It was going to happen at some point, or it might not have done. He might have always missed out on that move, but we are the top club who's taken the gamble. It's still a gamble to have been taken. Like you said, there are still reservations. I think he's a very smart signing for £35 million. I don't think it's a massive gamble that can hurt us too much. And I think that whatever way it works out, I think it still works out for United, because if United go and buy another big name and they place him alongside Manu, and Tielemans is there to add the experience of a third man, and Santos is there to aid his own development as that goes along, then great. Where those moving pieces come in, if Mount's the third man, and those requirements of the step up, because you're replacing a lot of different things. All right, it's a given that Casemiro and Manu didn't have a flowing mix. I know you will wax lyrical that there doesn't seem to be an obvious blend between any of the qualities that we've currently got in there. Like I said, you need that hard nut in there that seems a more obvious complement. That doesn't mean that those players won't complement, but you do then miss the qualities of an individual. Like, for example, Casemiro's experience and Casemiro's goals. So does Tielemans add those goals? Tielemans will bring goals, but he won't bring goals in the same kind of way that Casemiro brought them. For example, he was our primary threat from set pieces. Tielemans isn't going to be that. That's fine. He'll bring other things. Santos, what I like about him is he might not be the most athletic, but he gobbles space. He seems to do that a lot, and every midfield needs one of those players. We don't really have one apart from him, so that's great. Where those players might complement each other, I don't quite know yet. I don't quite know how Manu fits into that. I do think that from the profile and the names that we brought in, that Manu, it would be a crime if he's not the starting midfielder around whom we build. I just don't know how that looks at the moment.
Yeah.
And that's based on the individual qualities of two players that I'm very happy that we signed. It's what it looks like to me. If you were to say 4-3-3 and all three of Manu, Tielemans and Santos are the midfield, I think, that actually fits nicely, but that's not how United are going to play. That's not an issue. I think that, like you said, there are some games where the requirements of those players... The only issue I have with the example that you used against Brighton is Brighton were playing for nothing at that moment. And Brighton, when they were taking that game more seriously, that midfield probably wouldn't have worked. But I am positive about those players. I think they're very smart signings. I do think there's nothing to be negative about. I just think the overall conclusion is whether or not you have stood still or moved forward. And I don't know if there's a convincing argument to say that we've moved forward.
I agree, because what we've added to the squad with Tielemans and Santos is different than what we lost with Casemiro. And 9 goals with his head last season is an awful big miss in 40 games, and he didn't play all of them, right? In 35 games or whatever he played. I think he played 34, because 35 would have triggered another contract extension. So that's a big miss, right? 1 game in 4, he bangs one in with his head. I don't see a replacement in the squad for that at all. And so Tielemans will get goals. He may well get 9 goals this season. I mean, he's got the technical qualities to do it, so perhaps we add them in different areas. Yeah. I think it's the complements together that you're pointing to, and it is right, because I don't see Tielemans and Manu playing together in games where we don't have 60% possession. There'd be too much risk for leaking goals on counter-attacks, which we give away anyway, or historically did under Ten Hag and Amorim. Little different under Carrick, because they kind of sat 2 there, didn't he? Manu played quite deep in the second half of the season, was very good as well. So I don't know the balance is quite right in the squad. For me, it feels like 3 8s of different profiles and 1 6, who's very, very young. And do we think it's fair on Andrey Santos to ask him to play 50-plus games this season? I think that's very unfair on him. Higher technical qualities and other qualities he's got, and as good a player as he may become, he's not the fully rounded player yet, and it's quite unfair on him, I think. So I'd like someone to be there for certain kinds of games where we want a bit more physicality. They may well do it. I mean, of course, the dream would be they drop 100 million on Aurelien Tchouameni, who's got the highest duel rate on the ground and in the air, and is the best transitional defensive midfielder on the planet, like by miles, right? And he's a good passer of the ball as well. But I think that's very unlikely. I mean, he's got this new contract. No one's quite sure whether he signed it or not. And the moving pieces might have been different if Rodri had gone to Real Madrid as Mourinho wanted, but he's gone to Barcelona, and so it's very different. So, concerns. In the forward line, it's almost like we've got too many players. I don't know where you fit them all exactly, except you expect us to have a lot of games, and so it's good having horses for courses. I mean, we said a lot last season, hey, we don't really have a left-sided player who's good 1v1. Wouldn't it be good if we had someone who could take players on, come inside and shoot a lot, rather than dropping into the half spaces like Cunha does, brilliant as he is. Sometimes you want a different option. And so we do have one of those now. He's called Marcus Rashford, and he's like the most divisive player with some fans, isn't he? And then, obviously, Bumo's had a good pre-season, I think. I like, actually, what I've seen from him pre-season in that they're trying to find spaces for him to run into rather than ask him to play like Sesko, because he's never going to do that, right? He's not going to hold the ball up and bring others into play. Yeah, he's very good at running into spaces and we've got all these line-breaking passes. Why don't you make sure they can pass to someone? So I like that much more than Cunha up front. I like Ahmad's been okay in pre-season. He's got to add goals. For me, he has to add more. He got 2 goals last season or whatever it was. More output, I think. Otherwise, he's a very good squad player, and technical qualities, though he's got, it's just not enough. Right? And then Lacey, who's been really good, but do we think it's worth him having 10 games this season and a few sub-appearances or going on loan? That'll be a big question for them in the next 2 weeks, basically, I think.
It will depend on the loan, because I do think it's the quality of that 10 to 15 games, really, because I think it might be better at United than it will be Norwich, for example. Just say Norwich.
Yeah, sure.
Our view in the Championship, because I think that would be the level of club who would go for him. I don't think he might get lower reach as Premier League club going for him, but I just don't think he would. I think he's too
technically better than that, but I think it's they'll be looking at the physicality. Like, is he ready to play here every week? Yeah.
For what they need, they need substance and safety, and they don't want to take a chance on developing a United player when they've got hundreds of millions at stake for their own club. So you would probably find a Championship club who've got outside chances of promotion taking that chance on him. And I think that selfishly for the club, I think that 10 to 15, and maybe even for Lacey as well, because he's been in around the periphery and we've talked about him for a couple of years. You think that maybe it's better to be under the eye of the manager and get those games, because when he did play last season, there were those moments he thought, I like what I'm seeing. The issue that he had was when Ahmad and Mbeumo came back from the African Cup of Nations. He was just never going to get a minute. So hopefully he will. I think you're right. I think, and it is that sort of the increased number of games that might see that happen. And this isn't all about Lacey by any stretch of the imagination. It's because Sesko strikes you as the ideal plan A, but United aren't going to be playing that ideal plan A that many times this season. I'm not saying Sesko's not going to play that many times. He'll play plenty of games. What I mean by that is, I think that in the bigger games, what Carrick saw last season from the way that he deployed Cunha and Mbeumo in the attacking positions in different games, that's the route that he's going to go with Ahmad on the right and Mbeumo through the middle. And I don't think that's a necessarily bad thing. But I also, because of the nature of the way that plays, then with the League Cup games and with the increased Champions League games, you are going to see Lacey getting a few more games on that side, or a few more minutes at least, in order to free up that. I do think that we've got work to do on the combinations. sometimes when it's fluid, and it's usually because of Bruno being the axis in there that makes everything move like beautiful clockwork. But when you don't have that, everything looks a little bit disjointed. And sometimes it can look disjointed in the best kind of way. I mean, look, Dorgu and Fernandes in the game at Arsenal, it was a mismatch, but it was beautiful in the way that it ends up with the goal. It looks like if you were to watch it, you'd say, oh, God, they must play like that every week. But obviously we know that was a complete one-off, but it was so beautiful in the way that that goal was constructed. And there were so many different goals like that you could say the same about. So what you've got really is a collection of, it's a classic case of classic individuals who are so good individually, but we've not seen anything in apart from those flash moments of brilliance. Now, all right, that can get you over a season if it happens 60 times, and it could well do with that collection of players because it's all there, all the combinations are there. But what you do want to see is some kind of fluidity. Yeah. I do think that there's the makings of a plan in there, more through the plan B with the likes of Amad from the right and then Mbeumo through the middle, because then you've got some semblance of, you know what I mean? It's not crossing to Sesko as a target man. This is a dynamic game plan that emphasises all the strengths of the different players that you've got. And I think that the plan B is probably the strongest option that we've got for that. But I do want to see a little bit more. This is the season where we want to see more, because you're going to increase, hopefully, from 40 to 60 games, that you want to see those different combinations. And you will see them. They'll arise out of something. Those combinations that we don't expect right now, that Sesko will strike up a good relationship with someone, Lacey will strike up a good relationship, Dorgu given a good run of games, Rashford, even if he gets those games on the left-hand side, all these different kind of elements are going to start playing. But the thing that's going to take United from where they are to moving forward, and they can do it, this is the optimistic side, they can do it with that combination of players that they've got, even if they don't bring in an experienced striker. Say like there's an explosion or there's some kind of dynamite waiting to go off. Remember when Van Nistelrooy left, we knew that Rooney and Ronaldo were brilliant. Yeah. And we knew that Zaha, if he could stay fit, could help a dynamic attack. So you lost the dynamic, you lost the guaranteed goals of Van Nistelrooy, but you added a dynamism because of the counter-attack play that you allowed to flow through that. I'm not saying Rashford coming back adds that. I don't mean that. What I mean is like something will click at some point. Something different will click through that combination, through this added experience of those players playing together. There's too much quality for something to not click. Yeah. It might not be something that we expect right now. So I am optimistic about that, and it's actually exciting because we don't know what it will be. I think, I've been very high on Amad for a long time. I went really high on him a couple of years ago when he was playing well under Amrin when he first came in. Even though the team itself wasn't playing great, I thought, you've got a top 3 player in the league in Amad. If he's utilised in the right way, I think he's fell by the wayside there. I think I've been a little bit too optimistic, but there's still something great in there. And I think within the combinations that you have, it's like the classic case, and sorry, I am labouring the point, but just very quickly, just to conclude, Mo Salah, Liverpool fans will argue with you that he's the greatest Premier League player of all time, or second, because they'll put Gerrard first. And I think Salah's the greatest example, probably ever in the Premier League, of a system player who, if you play him on the right-hand side, he was so effective, almost unstoppable. And every quality that he had was emphasised to the maximum. But if you play him anywhere else on the pitch, even on his natural left-hand side, I think he looked distinctly average. And he's not distinctly average before that gets clipped up and thrown against me. But he wasn't an all-time Premier League great, and he wasn't an all-time Liverpool great. I think from his left-hand side, you could name 5 players better in Liverpool's attack. You could name Torres, Owen, Suarez, Fowler, all better on that side than what Salah would have been. So what I'm saying is there are combinations in there waiting to be unlocked, because there's so much individual talent where something different can arise, and it will be something unexpected. I'm sure of that. I'm really positive about that. I just can't predict it at this moment in time because it's so difficult to predict.
Fair enough, yeah. The 3 players we haven't really mentioned much of so far are Dorgu, who you briefly mentioned there, Sesko and Zirkzee. Dorgu, I struggle to know what to make of him exactly, because I think they've profiled him probably correctly as not a defender. I mean, it's really hard to say. We've never seen him there. But I think the assumption is that he's not going to be United's left-back challenging Luke Shaw for that role, and that he will be used in forward areas, mostly off the left, but could be on the right, probably in specific games, as a more defensive option if we need someone who presses well, has a lot of athleticism, can chip in with goals, score spectacular goals. Will he do enough? I don't know. I'm not sure. It's not clear to me that he is someone who could get 20 goals and assists in a season, right? As a forward in a top 3 side in the Premier League, you'd kind of like that, right? Across all competitions. If he gets 10, I'd be really surprised.
Can I just quickly jump in? Because this would be where I would be bold enough to, if I'm going to predict something, I think he will break out. Maybe not 20 goals this season, but I think he's so raw now. But I think there's the capability of him to do what you're saying. I think that he can. Not as a defensive player. I think you're quite right. He's misprofiled there, and not from the right. Even though he can do that, he can moonlight on the right. But I think on the left, I think there is the making of a world-class player there. I think there's a few things that have got to go right. Like, he's got to kick on, and the team's got to work well around him. But that would be, if I was going to say, I was saying earlier, I don't know where that breakout's going to come from, or what where that firework's going to come. I think it will be from him, if it comes from anywhere, because I think there's something there that really could be different for United.
We will see. As a diplomatic way of saying, not sure if that's right or not, but we will find out in the fullness of time. Yeah, you're right. He has to add more consistency to his individual actions on the pitch. And
yeah.
Sesko, I just want him to be fit, because I'm sure he can score a lot of goals if he is. The fact that he's got a fully rounded game for a number 9, can score with both feet, technical goals, messy goals. With his head, we didn't see enough. We've not been actually playing enough balls into him. You want that as an option, right? He's had such a stop-start time at United. Plays a few games, gets injured, gets dropped for the system, comes back, gets injured again. And it's such a shame that he's not had any pre-season at all. He's been training but not had any minutes. It's a problem. I'm hoping that shin injury. It's a bit weird that it's taken this long, 3 months, to get over a shin injury. It must be much more serious than we were told at the time. He was shoved down onto the pitch, wasn't he? So there's that. And then Zirkzee, my assumption is that if there's a loan with some kind of obligation, they'll probably take that. He's not got a lot of, 2 years at the club, he's not got a lot of value on the books, really. £15 million or something like that. If they could get something, they probably will. Although he did score a brilliant goal against one of the teams, Rosenborg. That was a lovely goal.
Yeah,
that one. We know he's got great technical qualities, but he just doesn't seem built for the Premier League. He's Dimitar Berbatov, but without the killer instinct. He's never going to score 20 goals in a season. Just never. He just doesn't seem to want to be a striker. So
it's a damning assessment of a player, because Berbatov didn't have the killer instinct. That's what held him back. Do you know what I mean?
I know, but he often scored quite a lot of goals as well. So.
No, he did. But if you're saying Berbatov without the killer instinct, and Berbatov himself didn't have one, with Berbatov without his killer instincts, then you really are worrying. No, but it's like I said when he first arrived, in the first 3 or 4 games, my assessment of him was he's a cute footballer, but that's his position. He didn't seem to be. All right, he's got the capability to score a goal, and that goal he scored was lovely. But you knew, there were chances against Forest in the last home game, just chances like that, and it's like when it's a serious game, it's like, all right, we should almost have 4 or 5 players that we just have for the pre-season friendlies. Was it Lee Martin we used to rock out, and he'd score the great goal? I'm talking about the young Lee Martin.
Andreas Pereira.
Pre-season Perlo. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. And I don't think there's anything in Zirkzee apart from sell on value, and even then it's tanking. So get what you can for him. Sesko, everything he said, completely up on. He's got that. It is to do with the combination and the service. He's got the best provider in the world in Bruno Fernandes, but ironically, probably the one kind of game where you wouldn't say Sesko excels at is that kind of, Bruno playing the through ball, Sesko running onto it and finishing.
Yeah, it should be good at that because he's got base of pace. Yeah,
he's got all the attributes, but when you think of his goal profiles, it's almost everything else but that. The one thing you would say is that hopefully he's been watching videos of Casemiro because he can place himself. He's got the height to do it. He just needs the physicality and the I know there's a nous.
Instincts to attack the ball. Yeah,
exactly. So to do with to put your head in places where Casemiro was going to do it. So he can provide those goals. I don't have any doubts over him. I think he'll settle. I don't know if he can go to 30 goals a season. That might be due to the way that United miss their front line around as well, as much as him. But United have got to learn to play to his strengths as well. They've got so, you know what I mean? That's the only problem that you've got with so much individual quality around, is that there is a lot of selfishness in there, and if they can harness that towards Sesko and help
more
him
system
out,
goals,
that might be better for everyone.
Let's round off this season preview by talking about what we might need to add to the squad in the 2 weeks before the Premier League. Not the Premier League. That's next weekend. The window closes. It is a shame that we haven't concluded all our business. Well, I'm hoping, touch wood, we haven't concluded all our business before the actual season kicks off. And then talk a little bit about rivals. I mean, for me, it's really obvious. I mean, I have quite a few I'd like to have if I was like building a Premier League winning side. But if it's to fill out the obvious holes in the squad, it's the midfield profile I said of someone who's a real ground eater. It doesn't have to be a starter every week. I just think you might want that option now and again, and it feels like an imbalance in midfield. And then a challenger for Luke Shaw, or in fact, really a replacement, I think. Luke Shaw's got 1 year on his contract, and he'll get plenty of games. You probably want a backup striker, but I think the club think in Cunha and Mbeumo, they've got enough options there to support Sesko. Marcus Rashford, if he stays, again, question mark. Why are we still questioning this? The club, I think, what I understand, would love to get his wages off the book.
Yeah.
That's not enough for me, that £15 million that you would save. I know it really irritates fans, doesn't it? If he doesn't deliver enough and the big wages, it really does irritate fans. But that's not the reason the club are thinking about it. The club are thinking it's out of kilter. He's the best played player at the club. He would come back, probably be an option for rotation in amongst those many forward areas, not be the number one player at the club anymore. I mean, maybe his performances change that. Don't know. Who knows? And so that would leave United with a problem, though, because then you'd have Cunha number one for the left-hand attacking side and Dorgu number two. I would bet any money. I know you think Dorgu's got a really high ceiling. We'll see. If Dorgu gets 28 goals and assists next season, which is what Rashford got at Barcelona, I'd bet my fucking house that he wouldn't be able to do that. And that is not even me saying, hey, I'm some Rashford fanboy and he's the perfect player and what are you all lot talking? It's just profiles a player and what they're going to deliver. And so that for me is the question. If he goes, I'd like another player who's good in 1v1 in left-hand side. And I think it's really hard going into a Champions League season expecting Mbeumo and Cunha to play a lot of games at centre forward. If Sesko has a season like last season where he's injured a fair amount.
Yeah.
So what's your assessment of what United need? There's not even what they might do, because you could have a very cynical view on what they might actually do.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm agreeing with your assessment on Dorgu's numbers and Rashford's, by the way. I think what Dorgu potentially brings you, what none of the other players do on either side of the pitch, is that he opens the pitch up.
Very good big space player, yeah.
And, otherwise we're all inside and everything to the right. So it will be important. It'll be massively important. So there's that. What he doesn't have is someone behind him. And that's the issue. Luke Shaw, I think we were fortunate enough that he was durable, because he got injured a couple of times last season, but he played through it. And I think that was good to see, because it showed a resilience that we don't always associate with him. And I think that might be unfair, considering I think traditionally, I'm talking about the traditional perception of Luke Shaw, is that he doesn't have that resilience. But when you look at the things that he's come back from and endured, obviously he is. But I don't know if he's got the durability to sustain another season like that. Certainly not for twice as many games. It's not going to happen. And because of the natural wear and tear of his body, he won't play to the high standards that we know that he's reached in the past. And even when he did reach those standards, they weren't good enough to help us win a league or any of the serious trophies. So we need a player there, and we do need the big issue that we've got in the next 2 weeks is it's a really tricky one for the likes of Ratcliffe and Ineos. Now they back Carrick, because we have seen repetitive, and Luke Shaw is the perfect example, and I mentioned a few of the names earlier. How many players we've signed to play left back, and I mentioned 3, and we could probably name another 3 in there who've signed for the club, who've played that kind of area since Shaw's been at the club. Rojo, Blind, all these players who've been signed since we signed Luke Shaw, some of them to add competition, some with the
Teles.
Exactly.
Amrabat.
Yeah, he even played there. So all these players who played, Dorgu being the latest one. So you can't sign another player like that. You have to sign someone who is that significant upgrade. The obvious name is Lewis Hall. He's the only one. There might be a surprise. There might be a rabbit in the hat that they pull out. But the obvious one is Lewis Hall. It's difficult to get done for so many different reasons. So I wouldn't necessarily blame the club if they couldn't pull that off, because Newcastle all the cards.
Should have done that on June the 1st if they were serious about that one.
Exactly. But what I would have my concerns about, and this is the catch-22, right? It's a catch-22, damned if they do and damned if they don't. So I've got a lot of sympathy. But I would have my concerns if we went out and got another Reguilon-style player.
Well, there's talk about Raum, who is a good player, but not in the elite standard. Nathaniel Brown's the other one. I'd have really liked them to, if they would go serious about getting a really top quality left back, he'd have been one, but he's gone to Bayern, so that's
exactly. Well, that's the thing. Like a club who were decisive about what they wanted, and look, again, I can see the merit in how the club have tried to play the transfer window. And I know that you were right last time round, and we got a bit cross-purpose about what the club have got available to spend. I was talking from economic purpose of stability, and obviously, literally, they've got a lot of flexibility in the way that they can operate in this transfer window.
Oh, it's all debt. It's not from cash. I mean, being back in the Champions League will give them about £30 million additional profit about. Unless they go and win it, right, which doesn't buy you much. They have a lot of flexibility on the credit card, basically.
So this is a long way to just go around the same kind of thing, saying, yeah, all right, the left back is the option. But it's where I've got the sympathy after that, because I think you have to go big with that top option, because you can't just kick the can down the road with substance. Because in a year's time, if you get Raum or you get another random left back, you're left with that random left back, and Luke Shaw's a year older, and he's definitely going to be for the scrap heap in that next 2 years.
Well, he's out of contract next summer, so I can't see a scenario in which they renew him.
I can. Unfortunately, I can. But I mean,
Ed Woodward isn't around anymore. He'd be handing out the 5-year contract at this point.
You still wouldn't have a player, regardless of what happens. You're not going to have a player. Even then, in that scenario, if you're saying you're confident that they wouldn't retain him, then you've got to sign another one to challenge the left back that we do have. So you're still in that situation. The kicking. Do you sign one to be back up to the proper one that you sign now, or do you sign 2 average ones next year? And
no, what we do is we go into the season, here's the cynical view, not buying another left back, hoping Luke Shaw gets fit. By about October, he has an injury because he can't play twice a week in the Champions League. And we're playing Diogo Dalot over there, or Mazraoui, one of the two, because they can play left back. And then we're worried about squad numbers, and we get Lucas Digne on loan from Aston Villa in January.
We would have gone, but he went to PSG as backup. He's already gone, hasn't he? So
absolutely, it is a worry. And the cynical view would be that they're not going to go do the deals because they're looking for value.
They will do deals.
Yeah, they can do deals, but
they will do them. But that's
will
the
they
issue
do the big deal, the elite number? Yeah,
that's where I am with the. And so Luke Shaw's the example, but the method is carried over all areas of the pitch. Then, because you could say the same for a centre back if they wanted to really push the ball out and go for a durable centre back or another right back, because we're not convinced with those either, or another midfielder. What's the option that they go for at this moment in time? Because they've got the flexibility to go big, or do they go? Well, we can't get that name. So, and like I said, I do have a lot of sympathy for them, because they have sung from the hymn sheet of, we're not going to make the same kind of mistakes.
Yeah.
That's all right saying when you're on day one. But when you're in that actual scenario, and clubs aren't, like Lewis Hall can't just be walking freely from Newcastle, especially because they've already sold everyone. It's very difficult to manage that in real time, especially when you've got 2 weeks left of a transfer window and you are reacting to the state of play rather than being able to dictate the state of play.
Yeah.
So I do have a lot of sympathy for them, but that sympathy is going to run dry as soon as they make Carrick the protagonist of the issue.
Yeah,
exactly, and because that's when the aggravation will start from all of the supporters who are already a bit wary about what's happened this summer, and that's nothing to do with the transfers. That's to do with the relationship between the supporters and the club. So
yeah,
I don't want to be cynical. I want to be optimistic and say, all right, we'll go and get those 2 top names, because I think 2, definitely a left back primary option, but another midfielder in there. Because I'm all right with the forwards. I think there's enough combinations in there, but a left back and a midfielder, then I can say, yeah, I can actually envisage us finishing third again within the way that the league's looking at the moment. But without that, you have to say, I think there's going to be a bit of regression, and we better be ready for that.
I agree. If it is current state, I think there's likely to be a regression, and that's not saying I think they'll play worse football or Carrick hasn't earned his opportunity. It's just with so many more games and so many players who are vulnerable to getting injured, and some thinness in parts of the squad that is a concern, right? We've probably just shipped too many goals. Score plenty, I think, as long as Bruno stays fit, touch wood, as the principal creator. All right, let's talk about rivals a little bit, because it's interesting. There's a lot of change, right? Brand new manager at Chelsea.
Yep.
Brand new manager at City. Brand new manager at Liverpool. All quite risky, I think. And then Arsenal as the constant state. And if you look at their performance in the Community Shield, still fouling and diving their way to victories. I thought that had all changed with the World Cup. I thought it all changed, but we had the meat wall back, and we had Gabriel pulling and yanking people's shirts and then throwing himself to the ground all over again. Fuck that. But anyway, let's talk Arsenal. What have they added? They added the forward from Belgium, who's Greek, I think, whose name I completely forget. He scored a bunch of goals at Genk or something. Scored a goal at the weekend, didn't he? And then Bruno Guimaraes, who has a ton of experience, dueling goals, has a lot of goals. He's really bloody expensive for his age, but a very, very good player for win now, basically. Yeah. They are stronger than they were last season, and they were champions.
No, I think they're probably favourites again, and I don't think they're particularly impressive, because I think that they were gettable last season if you had a proper team challenging them, because I don't think that they made the most of the sum of their parts, but I think Bruno Guimaraes helps them do that. Unfortunately, I think what you've got there is a player who will help their attacking players play with a little bit more freedom and flair, and that's the worst thing that could happen for United. The worst thing that could happen is obviously Liverpool winning the league, but what I mean is the worst thing that could happen in trying to get closer to Arsenal is that they sign just that one player who's so sensible in terms of, Arteta doesn't even need to change his game plan. He can still be as miserable as he bloody likes. He can still play all the anti-football he wants. And it looks like he's going to without apology. But you add a player like that in, and his natural effervescence is going to sort out a lot of the issues in even watchability. As horrible as it's going to be horrible to say, but they're probably going to be a lot better to watch, a lot nicer to watch for the neutral. And I say that through very gritted teeth, because I didn't like watching Arsenal last season. I think they were one of the worst title-winning sides, certainly in terms of how pleasant they were to watch and to play against.
Yeah.
So I think they don't even need to change the tactics, and I think that they'll benefit from all of the instability that's gone around them. I think City will take a step backwards, not necessarily. I think there's a lot of change. I think that'll take a little bit of time. I think the quality.
And they've lost Rodri, who's a very, very important player. Elliot Anderson has many qualities. I think they'd rather have him as the connector than the pure number 6. So we'll see to go. And then Maresca feels like he's a Guardiola acolyte, and that's why they've gone for him, because, I mean, obviously he was at the club before, and he should be the closest coach to Guardiola that can build some chin. I bet, here's a bad take. I think he'll get 2 years at City. I don't think they're going to fall off a cliff. Why would they? They've got loads of players. They're going to add Buadi as well. You know, because why don't you just drop another 100 million on another midfielder? Because you can. Because no one's ever going to punish you for spending whatever the fuck you like. I don't think they'll have a big crash, but I wonder whether they're just waiting for company, really, and Maresca is the bridge to that era as the real successor to Guardiola.
Maybe. You could be right. There's nothing that strikes me as obvious as that, as they were when they originally laying the groundwork to get Guardiola in.
Well, they prepared for Guardiola for 3 years.
You might be right. I mean, they still speak so highly of company and everything. So you could well be right. I think there will be a drop-off. It won't be noticeable because I think too much money thrown at something absolves so much of the issue. I didn't see much of Elliot Anderson. I'll countenance this by saying he was after Declan Rice for West Ham a few years ago, the game where I've said this before on the pod, Rice at Old Trafford when Rashford scored a last-minute winner and he was in the middle of a bad run of form. And after the game, Rice had basically given a come-and-get-me plea to, it might have been 10 or... No, I think it was probably Rashford at Solskjaer at the time.
Yeah.
But his performance at Old Trafford was unbelievable. It's one of the best midfield performances I've seen for ages. And then Elliot Anderson for Forest at the end of last season was the same kind of standard. But there's nothing I saw in the World Cup that made me think...
No. He had a poor World Cup, Anderson.
He did. And so he might step up and be that player. I think there's going to be a transitional adjustment there, as is natural. I think what you'll like, and you know this, I haven't given Guardiola a lot of praise over the time that he's been in English football because I don't see there's any great shakes in doing what he did. I don't think it's worthy of the immortality that's been bestowed upon him. I think Jurgen Klopp proved himself to be a better manager for all the obvious arguments, like, you know, with lesser resources, with the usual way of building a team rather than being able to get over mistakes. I mean, Jurgen Klopp had to build Stephen Coker to play at centre forward at one point, didn't he? From QPR, the QPR defender. He was, you know, and Guardiola was just replacing 50 million fullbacks with another and telling them he wasn't going to teach defending. But what you do have with Guardiola, which is difficult to replicate, probably impossible to replicate, is the one thing he was elite at was managing elite players. And one thing that stood him out was the intensity with which he was able to drive them. Now, I think that fell off a cliff after he won the Champions League, because, and probably even a little bit before that with Guardiola, because his best team was probably 5 or 6 years ago. And when that didn't win the Champions League, he just went blunt force trauma and got Haaland in. Because he never played with a player like Haaland, but he did. And they threw enough money and they won the Champions League. But the team was nowhere near the same. They've hoovered up the trophies, they've won domestic trebles and all that sort of nonsense and the treble, but it wasn't the same. And I think Guardiola even knew he'd compromised his principles, but the idea of legacy was so great on his mind. So I think the driving of the intensity from him had sort of laboured over the last couple of years, and you could see that with the way that City fell off because he just didn't play in the same kind of way. And you can't go from that to... I know that they think he's a Pep light, but you can't step off the treadmill and get back on it in the same kind of way. Footballers don't work like that. Ferguson took a long time from dropping off, and I think he admitted that his first retirement had something to do with it. So to regenerate that kind of atmosphere probably took him 3 years. And developing different personalities to get there, moving out the Keanes and Beckhams, took him a long time, and he did that himself. Yeah, Maresca's not Guardiola, so that I think that they'll fall off. I think it won't be as pronounced as what has happened to United because they've got too much money for that and not enough accountability, like you said. So that I think that they'll probably be second or third. So I don't see them dropping off, but I do see I do see the facade of what was Manchester City moving to a different kind of, like they were under Mancini and under Pellegrini. They're just
and they won stuff under Mancini and Pellegrini, but
exactly.
Will they win everything? Yeah, I don't see Maresca as having the same aura at all. As much as he might be a good coach, and he's certainly a very technical coach, right? And in that he'll teach the same kind of principles, relationism between the various players and functions as you build up through the pitch, and the very system manager who played with a slightly odd 3-4-3 at the weekend. But he doesn't have the same aura until he's won loads of stuff, and I'm not counting the Club World Cup at Chelsea. No, definitely not. Doesn't mean anything because they played absolutely nobody before playing a shattered PSG in the final. So just have a dig at Chelsea there. All right, quickly on Liverpool. They still have the bones of their title-winning squad. I mean, Slot did what I thought pretty sure we talked about this on one of the pods, that he made really no changes to their system, and they made way too many. And it came with a decline in Mo Salah's ability, and same with Van Dijk as well, who I think was culpable for, it might not show in the Opta statistics, but partially culpable in a lot of goals being conceded for Liverpool. He's running on reputation rather than actual current ability. They've got two very young centre-backs who are very good in Leny and Xhaka, who I do think are technically very good. We'll see, much like Heaven and Yoro, whether they actually develop in the Premier League or not. They've obviously spent loads of money. It looks like they're trying to buy Bradley Barcoa. Whether they'll get that done or not, that'd be another £100 million or something like that if they do it. And then they've got Iraola, who, again, in modern football parlance terms, the question is about scalability. Can you take his game model, which is underdog football, high intensity pressing in order to put technically superior opponents under pressure and get cheap goals, right? Can you scale that up to a team like Liverpool where you're expected to be on the front foot all the time? It wasn't obvious to me. I mean, when we were talking about options like to get the full-time position at United, if it wasn't going to be Carrick, when I thought about him, that was my worry. Could you just take that Bournemouth game model and transplant it to an elite club where they're expected to play front football? It wasn't obvious to me, right? And the little I've seen of them in pre-season kind of looks like that still. And I think that'd be a worry for them. I think they may well end up conceding more goals than they expect and not playing the style of football that Liverpool fans want. We'll see. I do think he's an interesting coach. And they've still got 2 weeks in which they appear to want to spend a lot of money on another forward.
Them and Chelsea are the poster boys for money doesn't buy you guarantee success. So are we. But so everyone. I mean, everyone's spending hundreds of millions of pounds in the Premier League. But yeah, I think on paper he does suit Liverpool, because I think if you think of Liverpool at the best, you think of a team who really do suffocate you on the pitch, and his teams were able to do that. But that can be a product of underdog mentality and championing your players in certain kind of way. Because we talk about Maresca and Guardiola and the difference in motivation. I think. But this is the unknown quantity, right? This is where we're going to see if he's capable, if he is going to be one of the greats of this era, or if he'll be swallowed by the weight of the job. It'd be an interesting one to see. Obviously, I hope he's doomed to fail. He's a nice guy. His Bournemouth teams have been great to watch, horrible to play against.
Yeah. Because
of that, and I mean that's the biggest compliment I can say. I'm not saying that in like, and the Nuno Wolves team.
Not in that way at all. In a very, very, very different way. Yeah, and I think that's why people assume that he could go a bit further. Like Nuno, you would never say that he should take over a top club. Just never. All right, you can say Spurs are a top club, but yeah.
There's a reason why you've not mentioned them as one of the teams.
Let's mention them briefly, and then Chelsea as well, because and Newcastle. Now we've got onto like half the division.
I've not finished on Liverpool. But
go on, sorry.
I'm not going to labour a point here. I'm going to say this. I want to revisit this on the preview game, so get me on for when we play Liverpool in the league.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about, because it'll be better to talk about this when we've got a little bit more information on it, the Bezos involvement in. All right, it's a bit ropey right now. We don't know all the details of it, but in terms of clubs developing selfishness over a generation, I didn't expect Liverpool to go down that route.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they are going down that route. We don't know the finer details yet. We don't know how involved he is, how closely involved you could say Amazon are, considering they don't have a TV deal. All of these things. I'll kick this can down the road until we do the preview when we've got a little bit more information on it. But it's something I want to discuss because I think that could be the biggest change of all of the Premier League summer.
We'll see. Yeah, I mean, I don't think if you're a Liverpool fan listening to this, which you probably aren't, but if you just accidentally come across it and you're like, yeah, I'd like to listen to this United preview pod. It is said. We haven't got all the details yet. And there's an assumption, one, that he may own about 16% or so, and a consortium around about 30%. And that there may be, as part of the sales agreement, which I personally haven't seen. If it's on the internet, I'll try and find it and discuss it with Jamie. We'll do a finance pod at some point soon. That the overall valuation for a full buyout is $8 billion, something like that, which puts it around about on par with the United, a couple $100 million here or there, the stake that Ratcliffe took in United, around about. And it's the 2 years on in which the football valuations have inflated. I mean, just look at United's share price right now. So that's one thing. On who he is, he's a value investor, right? Always has been. It's like Amazon run on very lean principles. I mean, they literally have 16 principles, but we won't go down there. But very lean principles. His other investments through Bezos Enterprises, which is his family office, similar. Like, it's not particularly massive risk taking. The biggest one there is the Washington Post, but a whole bunch of others, dozens and dozens of others that they bought into. It doesn't strike me that is quite obvious for how you would necessarily run a football club. I know that FSG haven't been wildly out of that mentality until the last couple of years when they've been splurging money. So I'm not sure. He's not on the board. Right? Busier, who, by the way, if you want to be really worried or hopeful if you're a United fan, go and look at what he did with Flavio Briatore at QPR, right? A fucking mess, it's a decade ago. But so we'll see. I don't think if you're hoping for millions and millions of pounds in transfer market spending because Bezos pulls out his wallet and gives, £300 million of owner funding, I'd be really surprised, but you never know. I mean, what's he doing it for? It's obviously not an investment, quote unquote, right? In the same way that FSG, as a family-owned private equity fund, is. It's very different. Is it legacy? Is it vanity? He's looked at sports clubs previously and backed away from it when it felt like there were overinflated values, which will tell you something about his mentality as an investor. So anyway, this will all play out.
The key isn't. I'm not necessarily bothered about the investment side of it. Liverpool spent £300 million last summer and got worse, so I'm not that bothered about that. It is to do with how much develops about... Because Amazon might not have a TV deal now, but they're still players in the game, and they might be in the market next time it comes around. You've seen a lot of self-interest from clubs over the last 4 or 5 years, from the top clubs in particular. The biggest thing that exists in football... The biggest thing that exists in football is a Premier League TV deal. If teams start going self-serving in that, this is good for United, really, if that happens. That's the biggest change in football on the horizon. And if Liverpool instigate that, it'd be the worst thing. The worst thing that could happen to football is that. As in, like, looking for a closed deal or for individual TV deals rather than a collective one. Yeah. Because you couldn't. The Premier League would collapse because it just isn't the interest in watching Bournemouth and Everton. Yeah. There just isn't. The pre-season Premier League tournaments have proven that. But Liverpool aren't the catalysts of this. They're the catalysts of dipping their toe into the market with Bezos. United obviously were with Sky, and they got run out of town, thankfully. And I'm saying this in my position as a football fan, not a United fan, because United fans could rejoice over this. Because if they got their way, let's say if Bezos went the full way. Sorry, the reason why I was saying about to save this for the Liverpool pod is because of this reason. So I could go on and on about it. But if they did go down that route and sort of negotiated individual deals, then United are by far and away the best place for that. So they'll be laughing. All of their problems, all of their debt problems, all of their worries for the foreseeable future
just disappear.
They will, because they will become the eminent club again. That will happen. But
I think that's a long way down the road. Though,
exactly. I hope it doesn't happen. I hope it doesn't happen. I hope that these concerns. I hope that he's a silent person. I hope that he has got nothing to do with anything. He doesn't befit Liverpool if they were the club who instigated that as well, because they and us, every club should be above it, but they and us should be above that. Arsenal should be above it. Like City and Chelsea, don't put them above that. That's the kind of self-serving interest that you can imagine them going down the route, because they are desperate for the prestige of Arsenal, Liverpool, and United. They can't. No amount of billions that they spend, of nonsense that they try and perpetrate through their club, the simple line, money cannot buy class, and they've not been able to do that, and they'll never be able to do it. It doesn't matter how many mouthpieces you have on the overlap saying the same old nonsense about how good City are. They're just not
Paul
there.
Scholes normally, isn't it?
Well, yeah, exactly. But I mean, I'm talking about the fans and the way that they try and sort of monopolise this idea that we are the product. They can do that while they are the product. But if clubs start, and that's why I say I hope it doesn't happen as a football fan, because the Premier League will be destroyed. Everything that you've built, and we're not that far away. If Liverpool threatened to do it and another club thought, oh, do you know what, we'll try and get the first slice of the pie.
Well, they need 14, and I think the thing that's really worrying is if you take the natural evolution from Project Big Picture, which was about consolidating more power and finances in the top clubs, to the European Super League, which was creating a closed league with private TV deals. Like there was some collective element and then some private element, and you take that they take that evolution, and you say, hey, the top clubs like to point to that. They would have to convince the rest of the league, or 14 clubs, right? So the big six plus another 8, they'd have to convince that was in their interests. And I think we're some way off that. The football regulator will have something to say about the Amazon Bezos link at some point. He's not on the board, so they have kind of clearance for now. But if it ever was to come to a full takeover, that will certainly be on the table. Briefly before we go then, Spurs, who've spent 85 million on Matheus Fernandes, around about 100 million once the bonuses are added in on Sandro Tonali. Looks like they're trying to do a mega deal for Savinho, a player who scored, was it 1 or 2 goals last season? I may be doing him dirty. Maybe it was 3. It was not very much. A player, by the way, Savinho, this like classic modern football, who was allowed to play for City in the Champions League despite coming from a City group club in Girona, who were also in the Champions League, because he was only on loan at Girona, on loan from a third City group football club, Troyes in France. Fucked up or what, and they bought him for the bargain price of 20-something million, and it looks like they're going to make a massive profit on him. Fuck modern football by selling him to Spurs, who'll buy absolutely anybody at any price you like. Are they going to be better this season? Spurs? Surely De Zerbi is not going to be as chaotic as they have been. Surely, because he has very, very clear footballing principles, normally about playing rapists, but, that's another topic altogether. Just go check his squad history out, folks. What do we think of Spurs?
No, wow. Okay, yeah.
Sorry, there was a lot in there, wasn't there?
You threw me with that one. Kia Jarabchin looks like an angel at the side of, that Savinho nonsense. No, I think they'll improve. I think maybe one thing that'll change about them is that they won't be so soft-bellied because of the 2 players that they've signed.
I'm sure they won't.
We've said the thing about Spurs that's almost generational is that they are soft-bellied. They shouldn't be now. Whether or not it's De Zerbi's brand of football or Brighton's brand of football, when they were really at their ultimate, I don't quite know. I guess we'll find that out as well. I don't quite think from what I saw from Marseille that they were anywhere near as good as Brighton. Obviously, a lot of that depends on the quality of the player. Spurs have got a lot of good technical players in there as well. But yeah, it does strike me as almost typical Spurs that you get two players of proper quality and then you add like a duff attacker on the top of it. Like, what? Bringing Christian Gross as manager, do you know, like, it's like signing Jurgen Klinsmann and Ramon Vega. It's such a Spurs thing to do. I think they'll improve. They'll massively improve. I just don't know if they'll be Champions League. I said that. I don't know if we will. They might be in the same boat as what we are. We might be scrabbling around for the same kind of league position as them again. So I'm not devaluing them at all. I just don't think that they'll bridge that gap to Champions League football.
Well, no Champions League football for them this season, and having fewer games, like, that's a bonus, probably. It worked for us last season. So, and then Newcastle, they've sold absolutely everybody. Have PIF, maybe PIF, since we've been talking about ownership, have they given up? I mean, they've cut back on a lot of their sports investments. They seem to be saying, hey, Newcastle, you have to go and live on your own. Maybe they went for it a little bit and have realised the rest of the Premier League were like, no way are we having the world's largest sovereign wealth fund spending whatever they want. We've learnt our lesson with Chelsea and City finally, and we're going to tighten the rules, which they did. They tightened the rules, and Newcastle have found that they haven't been able to break out of that. I guess if you're really cynical, you'd be saying, why did they bother sticking to the rules? Chelsea haven't. Why didn't they sell their training ground to themselves for £200 million and the women's team and, I don't know, south end of Laziz Park or whatever they might own, you know? And get around the rule, or just break them and fight it out in the courts for 20 years. Like,
I think that might be where Amanda Staveley might be missing in her experience, that she can lead the horses to water, but there's just not enough magicians at the other end to make that water turn into 400 million checks.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I assume they're going to be mid-table because they've just lost too many key players, and why would they go forward from here with a manager who I guess has a reputation, I know he's been managing in Saudi Arabia, but in Europe before that as a sort of young manager with bright ideas, but just...
We could be surprised.
Yeah, maybe. Chelsea, God knows what they'll do under Alonso. I mean, they've been playing a back four in pre-season, so not his favoured back three, although building up with a three, so maybe it doesn't make any difference. Fuck knows with Chelsea. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a Chelsea who'd be able to give you an accurate prediction of what's going to happen. Literally, anything could happen. And I don't know if you could enjoy it. You know what I mean? I don't think you could look forward to that. I don't think... They've signed players. I mean, is it worth sentimentally spending £1,000 to watch Danny Welbeck play football for a season? Is probably worth it, but they don't have that sentimental link. They just not. Yeah. They don't have that.
Jordan Henderson and Danny Welbeck. Yeah, they have a problem with balancing the books. So I'd imagine, because they're already under a settlement agreement with UEFA, so one or maybe both of Enzo Fernandez, if they get the money they want off Real Madrid or Manchester City, will go, or Pedro Neto, who's an easier player to sell. Links this, again, talking of cynicism, links today, Pedro Neto going to Al Hilal or one of the other PIF-owned Saudi Arabian Premier League clubs for 100 million. Who is a large LP into the Clear Lake Fund who owns Chelsea? Would that be the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund? Yes, it would, Wayne. Yes, it would.
Thanks for answering.
One hand washes the other, as they say.
Yeah, and neither is clean. Certainly not down at Chelsea anyway. Yes, you've got a serious manager for an unserious football club, and I say that like, they could whoop us both times. They could win a trophy this season. It's just not. It's all a nonsense. The stories that will be told once Clear Lake go away,
and they will go away. Private equity fund, right? They have to sell up. Yeah, state wealth, they don't have to. They just seem to have lost interest. But But private equity fund, they have to sell at some point because that's how they make a return for their investors. Yeah. we've been going on for a very long time. I guess we should probably wrap this up, Wayne. Our preview, we always do a preview before the season starts, and then it could be redundant in 2 weeks' time as they do a shopping trolley dash around the transfer market and spunk all their money on Mara and Leny or something like that.
Would we? We would.
Has he retired? Is he still playing?
No,
Last I remember,
has
he?
Right? I've checked. I have checked. There's no danger of it.
Very good. All right. Well, we'll leave it there. I have in front of me here, do the call to action, which I absolutely never do because I'm a useless content provider. I'm supposed to tell you people to hit subscribe if you're listening to this in audio, or especially if you're watching this on YouTube, and to leave a comment. It helps the algo. You can send something abusive if you like. Just at least be creative with it. Right? Someone this morning was like, oh, you're just posting this for clicks. I'm like, oh, for love of God, just get a better pushback than that. Be creative with your abuse. Please, people, that's all I ask. I don't care if it's abuse. I may push back, but at least give me something new. Wayne, thank you very much, as always, for being on. If you like our stuff a lot, you can subscribe on patreon.com/NQATpod for our extra show or ad-free listening if you hate us plugging Claude or whatever we're plugging this week. So, yeah. All right. Bye now.